Yeah, so from Nura, we're going to talk about Nura's mission to deliver perfect sound for every individual. But before we talk about perfect sound, I'm going to talk about something completely different, just as a thought exercise. Imagine if all shoes in the world were the same size, and somebody said, I'm going to make one perfect pair of shoes, and it's going to be perfect for everybody in the world. What might that look like? And it just so happens that I have a video of my, actually now 3-year-old, it's his birthday today, he turned 3 today, walking in his mom's shoes, just to illustrate the point of how unabsolute the question of what perfect is. If you talk about perfect shoes, you have to talk about, well, who's wearing them? Is it perfectly matched that person? Similarly, for sound systems, if you talk about delivering a perfect sound experience, yeah, you have to first ask, if you say, okay, we want to make a perfect sound system, the first thing you have to ask is, well, who's going to be listening? Who is this perfect sound system, who's this sound system perfect for? It turns out that our own hearing is very, very different. Pretty much as unique as your fingerprint or your own voice. You could be recognized based on your own hearing profile. It is that unique. In fact, your left ear and your right ear hear differently, just like your left thumbprint is different from your right thumbprint. This is just meant to be a visual illustration of, this actually is captured from a real kind of plot, a logarithmic scale, that shows the range of normal hearing sensitivities. To put this in context, basically what it's saying is that at any tone that the human ear can hear, if your sensitivity to that tone is within a certain range, which in technical terms is 20 dB, that's normal diversity from one person to the other. Now, what's 20 dB and 20 decibels in more practical terms? 20 dB is the equivalent of 7 clicks on a phone volume button. So, in other words, there are some tones where you might be 7 clicks more sensitive than I am. There might be other tones where I'm 7 clicks more sensitive than you are. It's a pretty big difference. And that's why it's not really possible to design one universally perfect sound system for everybody. So while you can probably imagine what it'd be like to spend your whole life wearing shoes 3 sizes too big and then suddenly get the right perfect fit for you, the question of like, what would music sound like, for example, if you listen to it through a sound system that is specifically adapted to how you hear? So rather than me trying to explain to you, you can actually try it, not upstairs, in room 16, through door 16. But I'll show a video of a compilation of people actually trying this technology for the first time.
Wow. Whoa. Holy shit.
Oh.
Oh, that is huge.
That's wild.
Jesus.
Good Lord.
The physical aspect is just completely unique.
When you listen to really, amazing, in a recording studio where you're listening to a huge sound made by very expensive monitors.
Yeah, wow. That's just amazing, switching from generic, which I guess is headphones, to personalised.
They're so good. I didn't expect that at all.
Unbelievable. I can't get over that. I've been sitting in the middle of the orchestra. It sounds the same. Like that's crazy.
Funky in the front row. Shit!
Pardon the language, I'm told this is standard Australian.
Incredible. I'm honestly absolutely taken back by that.
It's probably one of the most phenomenal headphone experiences I've ever had. Probably are the best headphones anyone's going to hear so far. They might be the best headphones ever.
So that was a compilation of people's reactions to our first product, which is an over-ear headphone. We call it the Nura phone. And just a side note, personal note, like how to say, doing a startup, there's so many things that are always going on, so many different things to do every single day. My favorite by far is doing demos. Like seeing people have that experience for the first time and that reaction, that smile is freaking awesome. But the question we most often get when people try this is like, how does this work? You're talking about tailoring to a person's hearing. How do you even know how a person hears, right? Like they can't describe it to you, they can't tell it to you. And is there a way that you can just automatically, and that was really the question we started the company, was like, is it possible to somehow automatically understand how a person hears? And the answer is yes, it is possible. And we actually do it. So since this is a technology, meant to be a technology session, I'll do a little bit of a nerding out and describe the technology and the biology behind what we do. And explain how it is that we can understand and measure a person's hearing. Before explaining that, just a very quick, if you'll indulge me, stroll down memory lane back to high school biology and explain how human hearing actually works. And this is totally stole somebody else's video online that explains hearing in about a minute and a half.
Of infinite sounds. But how do we actually perceive them? Sounds are collected by the outer ear, which consists of the auricle and the external auditory canal. The sound is guided through the ear canal to the middle ear. The sound arrives at the eardrum, a flexible circular membrane which starts to vibrate when sound waves strike it. The sound waves are passed on by the movement of the eardrum to the middle ear. In the middle ear are 3 tiny bones, referred to as the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Collectively, they are known as the ossicular chain. These form a bridge from the eardrum to the entrance of the inner ear. Their interaction increases and amplifies the sound vibrations further before these are relayed fully into the inner ear via the oval window. In the inner ear is the cochlea, which is similar in shape to a snail shell. It contains several membranous sections which are filled with watery fluids. When the sound waves vibrate the oval window, the fluid begins to move, thus setting minute hair cells in motion. These hair cells then transform the vibrations into electrical impulses, which are sent via the auditory nerve and onto the brain. What we call noises are actually just sound waves, which are transmitted through the air.
So yeah, there was a bit of technicality in biology, but basically it explains how the motion of sound vibration gets transferred into, converted into electrical signal by shaking, basically vibrating the salt water inside the cochlea. What happens, that's how hearing works, that's how input works, but how do we use that to understand how you hear? So it turns out that when that mechanical vibration gets converted into electrical signal that goes to your brain, there's a feedback signal that gets generated. Not an echo, not a reflection. It's actually a new signal that gets generated by the activity of these what are so-called hair cells inside the cochlea. It's basically the endings of the auditory nerve, which goes, one end connects to your brain, the other end is just swimming in that salt water inside the cochlea. When that stuff vibrates, then those nerve endings trigger, they fire a signal to the brain, and they end up generating a new set of vibrations. It's what in signal processing is called a nonlinear system. You put in some tones and other tones come back. Those same tones, the same vibrations then get passed back through this same system, mechanical system, back to your eardrum and cause your eardrum to start vibrating, not because of sound coming in, but because of activity happening inside the cochlea. It pretty much literally turns your eardrum into a little speaker cone, and it's actually pushing air, making sound come out of your ears. In other words, your ears produce sound when they listen. Sounds kind of weird, but it happens. Of course, that sound that comes out is tiny, like really, really, really tiny. It's about 10,000 times weaker than sound going in, so it's pretty hard to measure. But interestingly, this is that sound coming out of your ears. It's called autoacoustic emission, basically, ear emitting sound. It was actually interesting. It first predicted back in 1948, just based on mathematical models. People studying the anatomy of the human ear, and they'll look at the system and figure out, like, there actually should be sound coming back. There should be a new signal coming back out. Now, at the time, they couldn't confirm this because the sound is so tiny, like they didn't have microphones sensitive enough to pick it up and confirm that it happens. And not until 30 years later, in the 70s, they finally had equipment sensitive enough to be able to detect this and measure this. They're like, oh, here it is. It actually happens. It happens exactly as it was predicted 30 years ago. Fast forward another 25 years, and for the last about 15 years, that same phenomenon has been used to screen newborn babies for hearing. And yes, this is a picture of my kid, my other kid. I'm almost doing like a family slideshow here. His name is Tesla. He turns 1 year old next Sunday. So this was the day that he was born. They wheeled in a little machine, plugged into the wall, and they put cups on the baby's ears, and they monitor to see if this activity happens. Because a newborn baby doesn't react to anything. You can't check the baby's hearing like another way. Even if you snap your fingers or clap your hands next to the baby, they don't react when they're that young. So this is a way of just trying to determine, okay, is the baby's hearing healthy or is there a problem? And it's a very kind of coarse, like yes or no kind of screening. What we realized was that with advances in technology over the last 20 years in components and microphones, much smaller, more sensitive microphones, higher dynamic range microphones, plus really powerful signal processing chips that can be consume very little energy, very little battery life, we realized we could actually use this phenomenon and pack the technology in a small form factor, in a headphone form factor, and be able to measure a person's autoacoustic emissions, and not just to the point of saying, oh, the person can hear or the person is deaf, but actually work out exactly how sensitive your hearing is at each tone that you can hear. And that's what allows us to then take a sound system and adapt that sound system's profile to be specifically matched to how you hear. And that's the end result of all this biology and technology and signal processing, is that when you listen to music through a sound system that's like specifically tailored to how you hear, you just hear a lot more clarity, you hear a lot more detail than ever before, to the point where people sometimes even start crying when they try it, but I'll get to that. So when we set out to do this, like really we wanted to like enable people to hear music as perfectly as they possibly can. Like we're basically a bunch of music-loving nerds, at least people who started the company. Now the company has a bunch of actual musicians who know, including some sitting up front. But we started with like nerds who loved music. Like, well, we can't play an instrument, but hey, we can contribute by allowing people to hear music even more clearly. And pretty proud of how it has turned out so far. We delivered our first product beginning of 2018. Since then, have built up a very, very vibrant community of users, music lovers who use this. Our statistics show, because the headphone does connect to the cloud, so we can actually look at how people use it. On average, people spend 46 minutes a day listening to their Nura phones. People have Nura phones, which is pretty cool. Also, one of the other things we're quite proud of is that when we, from time to time, we update the software, release new features. Like when we roll out a new update, like 90% of our users go out and do the firmware update. And our users apparently even include musicians. Even one of my childhood heroes, Mr. Stevie Wonder, Mr. 24 Grammys himself. This is a video that somebody just sent us, like, oh, check this out. Isn't this like, your stuff? Isn't this a Nura phone? This is at a radio station in LA. He was just doing a live jam session in his harmonica, and he's wearing the Nura phones. Still don't know how he found out about us, but it's pretty cool that he did. And it turns out, like the local store in Santa Monica, he's gone in and twice went in and bought out all the Nura phones that they had. I don't know if it's like for his staff or what, which we're pretty proud of. We've since gotten a lot of requests for, especially from performing artists, like, hey, I love using the Nura phone for making music. Can you put this technology in something I can actually wear when I'm performing, like on stage, like an in-ear monitor? So this is something that has been a topic of a lot of activity for us recently. But our ultimate goal isn't just to make hardware and deliver headphones. We really want to enable people to get the perfect sound experience anywhere, and also for anyone. Right now, we're focused on people with normal hearing and enabling to hear perfectly. Long term, when we look at the trajectory of the company, we kind of view a multi-phase approach to what we're doing to deliver this experience to everyone. Phase one for us was simply make sure that the technology works and is actually doing something that is cool, that people like, that people will care about. So that was just when I'm spending 2-3 years developing the prototypes, eventually developing, getting it to mass production stage, getting it to a phase where it can be a product and be delivered, be robust enough. Phase two for us was after that, once we were convinced that, okay, the technology works, we're delivering an experience that people like, is to set up a service-based model for folks, to where people can get the use of that technology, first starting with our own hardware, but eventually being able to leverage our understanding, use our understanding of a person's hearing to tune even other sound systems. So imagine if, like, you're in your car, and we can connect to your car, we can tune that car's stereo specifically, to be a specific match to how you hear. Eventually, home stereos, music streaming services, and such. And another one that is also particularly exciting is eventually being able to use this technology to help people with poor hearing to understand even something as simple as speech better. It's a later phase thing because, as I mentioned, the signal that we measure to understand how a person hears is really small. That's for people with healthy hearing. For people with hearing loss, that signal is even smaller. The problem is kind of like trying to understand the signal coming back to measure it is, imagine standing at the bottom of a mountain, looking at the peak and trying to determine if someone has placed a pebble on top. Well, if that person has hearing loss, that pebble becomes like a grain of sand. So it makes it really difficult to understand well. But with the large user base that we currently have and the database, we already have by far the world's largest database of hearing measurements. We can then further train the algorithm, further train the technology to also help people with hearing loss as well.